And this morning's reading, the 27th Psalm, is a psalm of trust and waiting, presumably written by David. Some people believe that he wrote it in two parts. They think he wrote verses 1 through 6 when life was good, when God was answering all his prayers. Perhaps it was after he killed Goliath. And they think he wrote verses 7 through 12 when life was difficult, when he thought that God was hiding from him. Perhaps it was when Saul was fighting him. And then they think he wrote the last couple verses when he put the two parts together. Other people believe that David wrote it all at the same time. In the past, God had been good to him, so why was God not good to him now? In this psalm, we learn that for David, life had its ups and downs. The ups were the good times, the downs were the difficult times. This happens to us too. This psalm is a psalm of waiting on God. And it gives some clues about how to wait on God. And the first thing that needs to happen when we wait on God is to remember. We recall our past history with God. But the key is to remember God's faithfulness. Remember how we made it through the rough times, even when it seemed hopeless. The psalm opens up with these words: God is my light and my salvation. Who shall I fear? God is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. Those words are based on experience. David had experienced God's goodness in his life, and he knew that God is faithful and steadfast. And God hadn't brought him this far to simply be abandoned. And when things go bad in our lives, we need to do the same thing. We need to remember God's faithfulness. But when troubles come tumbling into our lives, it's kind of hard to remember those good times with God, isn't it? It's almost impossible to sift through our past and recall how God has pulled us out of some pretty sticky situations. So this is my suggestion to you. Go home today. Spend some time thinking about it. Write it down. Write down some times that you remember when God has pulled through for you. Put it somewhere that you'll remember. And then, when life comes crashing down on you, as it surely will, you can simply go to that desk drawer, pull out the papers, and read them. And remember. The next thing that needs to happen if we're going to wait on God is to pray. David said in his psalm, "Hear, O God, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me." Come, my heart says, seek God's face. Your face, God, do I seek. We need to be in prayer when we find ourselves waiting on God. And it doesn't have to be special words. It doesn't have to be as eloquent as David's are. It may even go something like this. God, I know I haven't been spending much time with you lately. And you probably think it's pretty crummy that I've decided to come running to you when things are bad in my life. I know I would if I were you. But here I am anyway. And I don't understand what's going on. I'm confused, and I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to sit here with you. And if you got any words for me, I'm open to them. And if you don't, I'm willing to sit with you anyway. I've prayed those words more times than you can imagine. So we look into the past and remember. We try to stay present with prayer. And we also look into the future. We look to the future with hope. David wrote in the Psalms' closing words, "I believe that I shall see the goodness of God in the land of the living." He had the past track record of God to go on. Things were looking bleak at the moment, but he could look to the future with hope, believing that one day he would see once again the goodness of God. Not in the hereafter, but in the land of the living. He would be alive to once again experience God's saving grace. When we find ourselves in a situation in which we're waiting on God, we also need to believe that things will turn around. God will touch our lives and things will change. It will happen if we wait. If this morning's psalm was written in two parts, if the first 6 verses were written when David was feeling good, and if verses 7 through 12 were written when David was having a hard go of it, then I think the final verse is God's answer to David's prayer. Wait for God. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for God. It's one of the most difficult answers to our prayers that you and I can receive. In our instant message world, we aren't accustomed to waiting. But God tells us to wait anyway. And while we wait, God continues to work in our lives. And we may just find in retrospect that what God does in us while we wait is as important as what it is we're waiting for. May we become aware of God's blessings to us all, even while we wait on God's answer to our prayers.